moral injury is about a feeling of I am unclean and worthy of shame. And I think that's very different from PTSD, because at its essence, I think of PTSD, it's an anxiety disorder where a person feels profoundly unsafe and like they can't afford to let down their guard. To trust others, to trust the world to be a safe place, and to trust themselves. And so when you think about trust in yourself, we can see how that can kind of blend into this concept of moral injury, of things that we might have done that were against our own moral beliefs. But they are two separate things. You can have one or the other or both.
And I think not just the spirit of being unclean or unworthy, if you will. I think there's an extreme sense of guilt that goes along with that, and it ties in, and that guilt is what is like the anchor that brings folks down. And so in order to work past that guilt and realize that you can accept yourself, or you can accept what you've done, what you haven't done, what you've seen, what you haven't seen, that comes back to your identity. And in that identity, I feel it's a wound of the identity, as many people have written about. And in the past, it's been put under PTSD, and now it sounds like we're breaking out of that and identifying it as a moral injury.
Yeah, it's unique in a lot of ways because each of us bring our own set of values as we enter the military, and when we see things or experience things, partake in things that go against those values, then we're left with this crisis of conscience, like you mentioned, and left to reconcile what that means to who we are as a person.
And I think that one of the other things that occur, and it occurred to one of my friends who served in Vietnam. I met with him. I went to see him about 6 months ago. And one of the things that I didn't realize he was dealing with was the guilt of not prohibiting something to happen. He wasn't even sure that it happened. But the very thought that it might have happened, and he didn't stop it as a squad leader, has literally crippled him for the last 40 years.
There's so many different ways it comes about. You're right. Is something you did, something you didn't do, something that might have happened. And you just sparked a memory of mine of witnessing. I was ready for combat, but what I wasn't ready for was to see how it affected the civilian population. And as part of my second tour, my job was to speak with the local people and ask what they needed in terms of medical supplies or doctors or roads getting rebuilt, so I could relay that back to the people on base. And even though I was able to take down that information and bring it to the people who I was supposed to give it to, they essentially told me, well, there's nothing we can really do at this time for these people. And that was something that really didn't sit right with me. At the time I had to kind of stuff it down, but it was something that I just wasn't prepared for, to see the people there waiting, for our help that I was unable to help.
Mike, you bring up something. It sparked a memory for me as well. I had much of a similar mission of rebuilding and nation building, bringing electricity back, food, water, and all that, and people would come to us and ask us for help, and we did everything we could, and yet we come to find out that many people weren't trusting to come forward, not because we were Americans, but because there were other forces in country in Iraq who were threatening them, saying, if you work with Americans, you will die. And that really, it made me feel almost helpless, other than to say, you can trust us, we will protect you. But there were times when we couldn't adequately protect them, and some people didn't make it.
Yeah, and as I look at it now, my values of helping people and service, which led me to join the Marine Corps and to be a leader in the service, it was conflicting with what I saw of being unable to help and seeing people suffer. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I just knew that something wasn't right. And as I came back home, I took that with me, and I took it very personally. Even though there's really nothing as an individual I could have done, I still was unable to forgive myself for that. And ultimately it affected a lot of my relationships with people, reflected my performance in school, at work. And so it's interesting to see how maybe one thing could have such an effect over time on not just myself, but the, the people I was around, who I care about, back home too.
You mentioned, that you get to connect with new people, and the military challenge is so much a collective challenge as well, right? You're working towards something together, and that's what allowed me to do the swim in 2013. Is I knew I wasn't going to be out there alone. I mean, when I had the kayaks out there by my side, when I was jumping off the boat with other people at the same time, it made it possible for me. I mean, what gives people, Terry? What gives them the opportunity to finally say, yes, I'm going to do this?
I think that, most people that join the military have a warrior inside of them. And this is definitely a challenge that you can find that inner warrior. And that's true in my case, certainly.
Just reconnecting it with something healthy,
and
right?
Reconnecting with veterans. That's also the biggest.
But how about the community? Is the community also involved in these kind of challenges?
Actually, yes. Our coaches are the Natadoros Locos. They're some of the finest swimmers in the world. So we're really blessed to have free coaching, that they're donating their time. Like you said, the kayakers, they're top notch. Your safety is never in question.
So do you? So the Take the Rock, that the veterans Take the Rock, that event, is that combined with the larger event that occurs? Because I know I have a friend that does a Take the Rock event that's not a veteran. He just there's multiple events that go on that are like that. Okay.
Everybody wants to swim from Alcatraz and do triathlons. So it's speaking of community sport, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the Vietnam Vets of Diablo Valley, our main sponsor. And not only do they provide a lot of the swim caps, the insurance, but also the barbecue at the end, and they are there greeting us as we jump out of the water. So it is pretty cool.
Very neat.
So tonight's episode, we're talking about challenges, not only in the military, but as a veteran. We want to know if you are engaged in any type of challenge, if you have participated in something that has helped you move beyond your experience in the military. Call in, email, chat. We want to hear from your experience tonight. So Kevin and I were talking earlier, some of these opportunities as a challenge is not only I don't want to say it's self-serving, but the Run for the Fallen opens up an opportunity to challenge yourself, and to do so by remembering the fallen, those that have died since 9/11. That's an emotional challenge. I guess in a sense, it's kind of opening up an opportunity for someone to address maybe some feelings that they have from coming back from combat and their buddies that didn't make it back. Can you talk about that a little bit? Or do any of these guys find that challenge more than just physical?
Oh yeah, I mean the physical challenge is what people worry about at the beginning, and then by the end of it, they're worried about the emotional challenge, because you're running up to the next mile marker and you see the families, and you're like, okay, I got to stay strong for them, and then you try not to let it affect you as much and try to stay strong. And then you're running again, and you're going from mile to mile. We actually had a spouse who her husband was killed, and she ran with his flag, and so that was pretty emotional. But it's like you said, very self-rewarding, because you go into it to try to help other people, and then you realize, wow, this is impacting my life in a significant way. So.
Well, I think it's fantastic. What are the first steps that someone should take if they want to get ready for a swim or a run or any challenge out there? What's the first thing a person should do to set themselves up for a successful challenge?
Join,
reach out.
Join the website. Join the meetup. Check it out. Check out the photo gallery and reach out.
Yeah, in our case, just going to www.taketherock.com gives you all the info you need, all the frequently asked questions, a way to sign up to be part of the group to see about the coaching.
And then after they've done something, because Mike, you mentioned, I did this, but then it led to this and this and this. So once someone has done something like Run for the Fallen, how do they connect with other things out there? What did you do to then expand it beyond just swimming?
After I was able to swim the 1.25 miles from Alcatraz, I thought, you know what, maybe I can take on a half Ironman triathlon, and maybe I can push myself to the next level. And just like you were talking about dedicating yourself to serve others and honor others, that I pushed myself to the next level to honor my friends who passed away, and by being the best version of myself I can. And so each race I do now, I dedicate that to my fallen friends.
I mean, your story is very unique. Tell us a little bit about the time, the sacrifice, and the time that you had away from your family.
Yeah, so in 2006, I just got married maybe a year or two before that, and I just brought it home, and for some reason I thought it'd be a great idea to leave and join the Marines. So I left. My wife was pregnant. At the time, I couldn't sell my home because in Stockton at that time you couldn't sell anything. So they stayed up here while I was gone. So for the first couple of years, my son didn't know who I was. I'd come home every couple months for about 2 or 3 days, and he was afraid of me. He was scared to look at me sometimes. And so it would take about 2 or 3 days for him to get used to me, and by that time I'm leaving again.
Right.
So it took about a little over 2.5 years before he actually ran up to me and hugged me on his own after my first appointment.
How old was he when you got out, Tito?
He was almost five years old. He was in like preschool when I came home.
How has that worked now? He's 10 now, so it's 5 years of you being around. But do you think that there was any?
Oh, we're just now starting to get a relationship together.
Yeah.
Almost like what Dee Dee said. Coming home, the mom, my wife, and they already had things going. She was in charge. He was like the new alpha, and we never saw eye to eye on a lot of things. So it's been a challenge. But like I said, we're actually doing a lot better. We actually talk and communicate. I've kind of was able to calm myself down a little bit, from my role as a Marine and a sergeant, and thinking, what I say goes. I couldn't rule with the iron fist. This wasn't the Marine Corps anymore. So.
Well, more to talk about this, and this is the fantastic thing about tonight's episode is it's not just up on the stage talking about parenting and child development and sharing our perspectives and really asking our questions as hosts, but it's an opportunity for you tonight to chime in with your questions, your comments. You can call us. Our phone lines are open. You can ask a question by chat, email. We're even Facebook Live right now. So we have a question, and first one's for you, Dee Dee. So, Dee Dee, the question is, when you have a 7-year-old with a learning difference, how would it be best to share with them their difference and to advocate for them at church, school, in the Scouts, etc.?
Wow, that's pretty complex, actually. I don't know about actually sharing the difference, because they just have their own normal. And you just bring in whatever outside advantages you can use or whatever, but not necessarily sitting down and talking about it as a difference.
So I assume maybe what they're talking about here is maybe there's a learning disability or some type of other type of disorder or such, right? And so what you're saying is that to them, although we identify them as being different, they don't identify that. They identify as being normal.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is to bring in their strengths. So how would you work that into when other kids start to think that they're different and maybe make some comments to them? This is a tough question. This has nothing to do with military veterans.
It really is a
but
tough
I think it's good because I think veterans are asking this question potentially. And this is not something you learn in the military, right?
Well, typically if your child has any kind of a learning difficulty, there's steps you take. I mean, through early intervention to once they get to be 3 years old and they get to go into the school district. And so they get plans written for them that helps give them the strategies that they need to be successful, because that's ultimately what you want it to do, is for the child to be successful. And if somebody says, oh, well, you're different, it's like, well, I'm me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate that you shared that. And great question. Please continue to ask questions. We want to hear from you. If there's something you want to know, if there's a story that you have, please share that story with us tonight. So real quickly, we have something for you, Sue. And it's Millie, who has sent us a message all the way from Afghanistan. And it says, Sue, thank you, Mom, for all that you have sacrificed for Ethan and I. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. Much love from Afghanistan.
Oh, that was sweet of her.
That's neat. I think that's that's the first question or comment we've gotten from Afghanistan, so that's pretty cool.
The furthest one.
And how neat that it was for you, Sue.
I am so proud of my daughter and my son. I remember her when her dad had to go. She was saying, "I'll never do that. I'll never do that. That's just not gonna be me." Well, I didn't expect her to join the military, and she did.